And in the season finale, June heads to the provincial court to make a statement on Fred. She doesn't want to run into Mark there, but she does anyway. And she's going to have to tape her statement because all the judges are busy. And really, this is just a formality. June's kind of wasting her time, and Mark lets her know that. Because sentencing agreements like Fred's are usually approved by the court. Fred's probably going to walk free. And Mark lets her know that Fred has already been very, very helpful. Very valuable asset. He understands this is tough for her and it's not easy, but he just doesn't want her getting her hopes up that her testimony or her statement could end up swaying anything. She makes her statement and then walks out. And ever since finding out that Fred was being converted to an asset, she's been having flashbacks of her time as a handmaid in Gilead, going through the motions of the ceremony and surviving by acting like she liked everything that was happening. She gets home and she's greeted by Luke, Emily, Rita, and Moira. Moira's on the phone, so she's a little preoccupied. And when Luke asks how'd it go, June says it was shitty. Luke tries to cheer her up by pointing out that Nicole is in Canada. That alone is a minor miracle. And it kind of works, but not really. Luke goes to tend to Nicole, leaving just the women to talk. And when Moira gets off the phone, she lets him know that the person she was talking to on the other line told her that Fred is flying to Geneva to testify. After that, when they approve everything, he's going to be a free man. So what Moira suggests is that June fly to Geneva and testify against him, basically going above Canada's head, drumming up some support and also doing the interview circuit. But June thinks that that's a waste of time. She tells Moira, look, I've already told them my story, and they didn't care. They basically decided that what Fred could offer them was more important than what he did to me. Moira then gets a phone call right before she takes you. She tells June, you're going to Geneva. And June kind of smirks because she knows that she's not. Later in the day, though, Emily comes to visit her and get the lowdown on the testimony. And she just can't believe that nobody was there for this testimony. It was just taped. June then starts crying and tells Emily, I really want to let go of Fred. I want to focus on my family. I want to focus on Hannah and Luke and Nicole. And she actually goes so far as to say a good mother would be able to let go. And what it boils down to is now June is beating herself up because she's blaming herself that her testimony wasn't enough to keep Fred in jail. And while June is beating herself up and the rest of the women are trying to figure out how in the world that creep could actually be set free, some of the information Fred is giving is letting Canada know whether or not some of the women from Jezebel's are still alive, which will give some families closure. But when Mark walks into the room, Serena pulls him out of the room again to have a private conversation with him because she's not happy. The woman in there from the government is being, in her opinion, very judgmental about the information that Fred is giving her. Serena actually wants this woman to refer to Fred as a commander. And Mark reminds her, your husband is guilty of pretty heinous crimes, most of which you were a part of. But Serena just repeats herself saying if this doesn't happen, the interview's going to end. She then starts making demands, saying that Fred needs faster internet access to deal with all of his press requests, and even mentioning they're going to need a big home for their family. And Mark reminds her that you're both still under custody until the judge's ruling is issued. To which she says, well, the judge's ruling needs to be expedited, because me and the commander have discussed it, and we don't want our son born in this place. Mark promises to speak to the prosecutor's office, but there's one thing he can't get over. He asks Serena, you're planning on living with him as a family. Why? And she tells him it's none of your business and then walks back into the meeting. Fred finishes up and he goes back into his bougie cell and he's packing up for Geneva when all of a sudden he gets a weird visitor. It's June Osborne, someone he definitely wasn't expecting to meet with. And June's kind of come there for closure. She's walking around basking in the fact that Fred is kind of terrified of her. But to June's utter shock, Fred apologizes for everything that happened. He starts off with a half-assed apology, saying that he holds no grudges, and he figures that what she did and told the court was a lot of saving face. But then, the half-assed apology kind of becomes a real apology when he says that now, ever since learning he's going to be a father, the idea of having his son ripped away from him is unimaginable. So he does, in fact, feel for what June went through with Hannah. And this apology actually brings June to tears because she never thought that she would ever hear Fred Waterford apologize to her for something that he did. Fred then gets June a drink and he starts talking about the relationship that they had. He even says, well, our relationship, I wouldn't call it love, but it was definitely something. And she agrees, oh yeah, no, it was something. He then tells her, as weird as this might sound, I find myself missing Offred. And she smirks at him and says, yeah, no, I do too. I miss how strong she was. They then make a toast to Offred and then she heads home. And as Luke is driving her back, out of nowhere, she just says, I'm going to put Fred on the wall. And Luke says, June, they're gonna let him go, so you need to let it go. But she once again reiterates, I'm gonna put him on the wall. And the next day, she starts to put her plan into effect. She has the embassy arrange a call with Commander Lawrence. And then she sits outside of Mark's house, which really pisses him off. But she says, you're not going to let Fred go to Geneva because I need Fred to get what he deserves. And Mark, who is exhausted of this conversation at this point, says, June, I get it, but I don't know what else I can do for you. And she says, get me a ride and just listen. So Mark agrees, and a government caravan takes June to an empty diner where her and Mark meet up with Lawrence. And Mark's a little surprised that June took the initiative to facilitate this meeting, but he is willing to listen. And this meeting was arranged so that they could make a deal for Fred, Commander Lawrence acting as Gilead and Mark acting as the U.S. government. And the whole time, Joseph is acting like he just wants to get his brother in arms back in the safety of Gilead. But Mark is kind of unknowingly being played by June and Lawrence. At first, Lawrence offers some monetary policy changes, which doesn't even move the needle, but eventually he gets to the actual offer. And it's 22 women that helped with the resistance. And June tells Mark, I understand that you think the information that Fred is giving you is going to save lives. Well, these are the lives that you're trying to save. And you can't tell me that Fred's life is worth more than these 22 women. And it's such a good offer that Mark has to take it back to his boss. So he heads out of the diner, and June thanks Joseph for showing up. But right before she leaves, Lawrence tells her, whatever happens to him when we get him, it's not going to be enough for you. And she just tells him, God bless you, and walks out. And later that night, June goes back home with Rita, Moira, Luke, Emily, and they start talking about what could happen to Waterford if the government actually agrees to this trade. Most of them think if it's put to a Gilead trial, Fred will end up going to jail. At the very least, he'll go to the colonies. He won't be free, though. Emily turns to June and says, but what do you want? And June says, I want him to be afraid. I want him to feel like I felt when I was running in those woods and they took Hannah. I want him scared to death. And the good news for June and company is the government decides to take that deal. Fred, however, is completely unaware of this. He thinks he's still going to Geneva. And right before he leaves for that trip that won't happen, he says goodbye to his wife. They're both kind of patting each other on the back of the job that they've done that they think is going to get Fred to walk free. Serena tells him to call when he arrives in Geneva, and they both agree to Zoom later that day. But as Fred steps out of the building, he's greeted by Mark, who tells him, you're not going to Geneva. And then Fred is arrested, and he is beside himself. Mark is informing him that the government has decided to go back on their deal and that he's now in custody. And as he's escorted into the paddy wagon, he actually has the audacity to say, I'm a man, I have rights. I mean, he was 2 steps away from telling Mark, make me a sandwich and wash my lacrosse penny. But Fred is loaded up and taken to the border. And when he's taken out of the paddy wagon, he asks, what, you're taking me to a dark road to be executed? And Mark says something way worse. No, you're going home, Commander. And as the 22 women are filing over the border, passing Commander Waterford, it finally dawns on him, oh my God, this is a prisoner exchange. And on the other side of that border, waiting for Waterford, is Joseph Lawrence. And Waterford tells Lawrence, everything I did was for my family, and I'm not going to apologize for that. He is visibly upset because he knows what's coming. But then Nick gets out of a car, and he feels a little bit better since he had a personal relationship with Nick. He even goes so far as to call him son. But it becomes clear real fast that Nick doesn't feel the same way, because Nick tells the Eyes to take Commander Waterford into custody. And Nick and Lawrence are just reveling in this. Nick then has the Eyes drive Waterford to a random wooded location, and Nick starts escorting him into the woods as Waterford is asking, where the hell are we going? And finally, Nick reveals, we're in no man's land. And that's when June pops out from the woods and greets them. And Waterford is absolutely stunned. June walks up, and the first thing she does is passionately kiss Nick. I'd like to remind the audience once again, June has Luke, Nick has this new wife. They're both married. Stop cheating, girl. Stop cheating, guy. It's wrong. But June thanks Nick. Nick gives her the keys to the handcuffs, and then he takes off. And now it's just June and Waterford alone in the woods. And he actually thinks that she might let him go because the last time they talked, it was a nice conversation in his opinion. But then all of a sudden he looks down, and June is holding a gun and a whistle and says, you choose. Waterford doesn't choose, though, and says, you don't have the guts to shoot me. And that's when June says, oh, okay, and blows the whistle. And that's when all of these flashlights come out of nowhere, and it's a bunch of women who had defected from Canada who are there to seek their revenge. Right before they get to Waterford, they stop behind June. And June looks at Waterford and says, run. And he takes off. And it's just as June wanted. Waterford is scared for his life. He's being chased by a bunch of women through the woods, and eventually he trips up. And that's when he's caught by the women. And June has the most satisfied look in her eye because she's finally about to get revenge on this guy. She starts wailing on him. And then Emily hops in. And then everybody hops in, all getting a piece of Commander Waterford. June actually goes so far as to bite him. And by daybreak, all of the women exit the woods covered in Waterford's blood. And as Serena is sitting in her cell, the way she finds out that Fred died is she gets mailed his finger with the wedding band on it. June gets home super early in the morning, still covered in Waterford's blood, and instead of washing it off, the first place she goes is the nursery to see Nicole. And as she's holding Nicole and telling Nicole that she loves her, Luke wakes up. He's kind of half asleep, half awake, and he says, "June?" And then he notices that she's covered in blood. And she says, "I know. I'm sorry. Just give me 5 minutes, okay? Just give me 5 minutes with her. Then I'll go." And June continues to tell Nicole that mommy loves you as Luke just crumbles to the ground as he tries to process what June did. And that is the end of Season 4 of Handmaid's Tale. Thank you so much for getting this point of the recap. I really do appreciate it. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it absolutely sucked. Consider subscribing to the channel. That would be cool. Be nice in the comments section. If I made a mistake, hit the thumbs down and keep moving. Oh, and I have merch. So, go buy a mug or something. Everybody could use another mug. Once again, thank you for checking this out.